Everybody, my name's Darren Barefoot. I'm going to talk about the mobile revolution. I'm going to talk for about a half hour or so. You can fire questions at any time. You can ask questions at the end, or we can just leave because I'm sure nobody said, oh, that presentation was too short on Monday evening. A little bit about me. We run an agency called Capulet Communications. We do web strategy and digital marketing, usually the other way around, digital strategy and web marketing work for NGOs and tech companies. These are some of the organizations we've worked with over the past couple of years. Some of you may recognize, some of you most certainly won't. We've been lucky to work with this growing tech company called Mobify here in Vancouver, and a lot of what I've learned about mobile, I learned from them. I need to verify that my collar has remained unpopped. Okay, I think we're good there. No, a little bit popped. Okay. Additionally, we write stuff occasionally. We wrote a book a few years ago called Friends with Benefits, a social media marketing handbook. No relationship to the movie of the same name, though I'm sure we sold a few copies accidentally when people thought they were buying the novelization. This is the latest thing we have written called The Noble Arsonist. You can get it for free at noblearsonist.com. That says stoking fires and igniting movements for NGOs and companies that care. So this is it's kind of an ebook. It's about 70 pages. It's just our current thinking on web strategy and how to do effective communications for what is sometimes called movement marketing or sometimes called NGO communications. So I heartily encourage you to check that out. You'll have to give us your email address, but we're only going to email you once a month, and we always try to deliver value in those newsletters, so it won't be all about like, hey, Darren got a new tattoo, or something like that. So this is slightly future-looking, slightly like present day to future kind of talk. And in that sense, whenever I'm talking about the future, I like to include this quote. There are two kinds of fools. One who says, this is old and therefore good, and the other says, this is new and therefore better. I'm going to be the this is new and therefore better guy tonight, but let's just keep some context for fools. This is kind of apropos of nothing, but I thought it was hilarious. Though I guess I could connect it to Facebook. Earlier this year, the end of last year, Facebook announced that they are now getting more traffic from mobile devices, meaning mostly smartphones and tablets, than from desktop computers, right? And that is indicative of the sea change I'm going to talk about over the next few minutes. But this made me laugh. This is from the Dr. Pepper, and also, this is from the Dr. Pepper page, and it says, like, if each Dr. Pepper is better than the next, which means your current Dr. Pepper is the worst Dr. Pepper you've ever drank in your life, right? They meant, like, if each Dr. Pepper is better than the last, right? But anyway, it just made me laugh, because 24,000 people admitted that their current Dr. Pepper is the worst one they've ever tasted. This is also a message about how words matter, right? And regardless of all this technology and design stuff I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes, getting the words right is really, really important. So, for most of the life of the internet, everyone looked at it through a window like this, okay? The technical term for this we use these days is called a viewport, right? Where to put my phone? This is the viewport of my phone. If you have a tablet, the viewport is like this or smaller. But this, until like 2006, 2007, people looked at the internet through this, right? In fact, 77% of all users on the web used one of two screen resolutions. And in this context, screen resolution can be a kind of stand-in for size, right? For viewport size or monitor size. So nearly everybody saw the same thing when they looked at the internet. Now, of course, since then, things have radically changed. Okay, this is a photo. Oh no, next slide is a photo. This is a little infographic we helped make. And what it illustrates is that 77% of people who were seeing the internet in roughly the same way, now 8 different viewports make up that 77%, comprise that 77%. And they are radically different in size. You may not be able to make out the difference in the screen, but this here is the iPhone here, obviously, right? We compare that to the Chihuahua. And then at the other end of these are all popular sizes of screens, right? Is this huge monitor, this huge display out there on the end, which is kind of comparable to the Great Dane. Okay, so this is from end of 2012, but the data is largely the same. Of all these different sizes, nobody has more than 20% of the marketplace of screen size, right? So the point now is that people are looking at the web through radically different sizes of devices, right? Through radically different viewports, I should say. It's just that, essentially. As an interesting note, as an interesting note, in 2012, there were 350 billion PCs sold, but 1.7 billion phones sold, okay? So gone are the days where PCs were the way we were accessing the internet.
Sorry, say that number, say that again.
350 million PCs and 1.7 billion phones. Those weren't all smartphones, mind you, but they're phones. I have some charts where the lines go up to illustrate that. Line goes up, good. So this is a chart indicating the growth of the tablet market, right? By tablet, we mostly mean iPads, but we also mean all sorts of other devices, mostly powered by Android, the popular operating system from Google, or Windows tablets, are relatively small. Does anybody in the room own an Android tablet? Anybody? Oh, okay, yeah. And does anyone own a Windows tablet? We're not going to make fun of you. Okay, we are. Okay, anyway, so you can see a radical growth. These two lines are corporate PCs and personal or consumer PCs, and that is the very steep growth of tablets. Now, however, when we add smartphones to that, a smartphone is a device that is essentially a sophisticated computer where people occasionally use it to make phone calls, right? It has a bunch of augmented technology in it, like a bigger screen, local storage, an accelerometer, which lets it know where it is in space, GPS. These are all characteristics of a smartphone. You all probably have one in your pocket, or most of you do. And you can see the pink line there. This is the previous graph squished, and the pink line showing the radical growth of smartphones. Okay? So if I haven't made my case yet, hopefully this chart does. But we should acknowledge that most of the world's phones are not smartphones. They are what are traditionally called feature phones. And entire continents still mostly use feature phones. Also Japan, interestingly, has this idiosyncratic relationship to feature phones where they love them. But the number of phones is still growing very quickly too. And we will see that smartphone number and that feature phone number cross, I think, eventually, but it's going to take a few more years. Google is working hard, actually, to put inexpensive smartphones into what we would call the global south, right? Africa, South America, where there are huge markets who are still on the kind of feature phone line here and are eager to get on the smartphone. So, this talk is called the mobile revolution or mobile revolution, but that's only kind of one part of what we sometimes talk about as device diversity or a multi-screen future, right? So there's small devices, smaller things that are smaller than my laptop screen. And then there are things that are very small, right? Like Google Glass. Everybody in the room has probably heard about Google Glass. I saw my first one in the wild. What's that? Yeah. Net Squared. That was Net Squared. Yeah, I saw my first one in the wild at Net Squared. And I was deeply uncomfortable with it. Like immediately, I'm like, that dude is recording me and my conversation in a way that, anyway, So I don't know, how did you feel about it?
I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, you thought it was awesome.
I was like, put your glasses on.
Yeah, anyway, Google Glass, this is the new fancy thing from Google where they put all sorts of data right there, right in front of your retina, and people can take photos by blinking and record audio and video by whacking their temple. I got a couple other examples of different kind of display devices. This is something you probably haven't heard of, and you may never hear of, but it's called Ocular Rift, right? Oculus? No. Am I saying it right?
Oculus.
Oculus. Okay, how many people have heard of Oculus Rift? Are you all gamers? Everyone? Yeah, everyone's a gamer. Yeah. So this is like, I've never actually used this before, but it's kind of like the next generation of virtual reality, and apparently it is mind-blowing to put it on your head. And it's a way we may experience future virtual spaces, or it may die a sudden death. But we're hearing a lot, in the what I'd call the nerd space, right? Who are the leading edge of all things. And I say that in a very nerd positive way. I'm a part of that nerd space. People are talking about this a lot, and some of those things cross the chasm to normal sphere, right? The normal sphere over here where the normal humans live, and some die, right? And that's fine. Both of those things are good. The nerds are excellent. Us nerds are excellent at kind of kicking the tires on things. So we're kicking the tires on this technology right now, and it may be like that science fiction future we dreamed of, or it may never go anywhere. And of course, most televisions they sell today are web-enabled, right? And a lot of them are freaking huge, right? 80-inch televisions, 100-inch televisions. There's no likely, end size for that happening. So people are actually going to be accessing the web, are already accessing the web, but are going to increasingly access the web on all these other devices too, right? So it's not just a mobile situation, but it is instead going from a screen like this to screens that are tiny and screens that are huge, okay? And so the rest of my talk is just, I guess, a few best practices, a few ideas to keep in mind at a relatively high level about how to think about how you're building websites for the mobile web, how people are interacting with the mobile web. And I am not a designer or developer. There may be designers and developers in the room who have a lot more to say, and I totally welcome and invite that feedback or the correction. You can say, actually, I think you have that a little wrong. Totally want to hear that. Yeah, I think I will proceed. So these are some design best practices. There has been a kind of two warring, over the past few years, there have been two kind of warring factions in the web development design community. And one of those factions we could describe generally as the one web philosophy, and the other as the M-dot philosophy. I am sorry if any of you in the room have an M-dot website, but your side lost, okay? So M-dot or T-dot websites is when you visit a website on your phone or on your tablet, and you don't go to the actual website, but you go to a copy of it that is at m.surreylibraries.ca. I don't know if they have an M-dot site or not. They probably don't. But if they did, that would be the experience, right? Or our website is Capulet.com. It would be m.capulet.com. Okay, so technically speaking, that is a whole other copy of the website typically. And there are lots of reasons not to do this. But it's possible that if you're looking at building a mobile site or making your site more mobile friendly, that somebody pitches this to you, decline it. Say, thanks very much. We'll go find another designer to do this. Because there are a bunch of reasons, and you can go read all about why these M-dot and T-dot sites are bad. But three basic ones are search engine optimization, right? You're making a copy of your website. This is never a good idea to copy your content on the web if you want to. That's a great way to punish yourself in terms of search engine optimization, or SEO. Two, website performance. Often you probably had this experience where you enter a website URL, and then there's a kind of long delay as the website redirects around, takes you to the main site, and bounces you to M-dot, and it loads the page slowly. Performance matters a ton. I'm going to come back to performance in a minute. And finally, social media sharing, or any kind of sharing of the URL. If I'm on the M.dot Capulet site, and I email you, and you're on a desktop, I send you the mobile optimized version. We've probably had this experience where you get the mobile version and it's like this big on your screen, right? And there's like one line of text, then it's like an article blurb. And it's a suboptimal experience, and you're likely to go, dude, why did you send this to me? This is awful. So yeah, M-dot and T-dot websites. Oh, look what I've made a typo there. T-do. You've all been staring at that for the last 5 minutes, haven't you? You failed to do it. Anyway, that's supposed to say T-dot. We'll just forget about that. Performance isn't optional anymore. For lots of organizations, for-profit, non-profit, small, large, you never talk about website optimization, right? You never talk about performance because it's out of budget or it's out of your organization's technical sophistication. There's no shame in that. That's extraordinarily common, like I say, in both NGOs and for-profit companies. If you don't have like an e-commerce store, you probably don't have many conversations about performance. And by performance, I just mean how fast does your website load, essentially, right? But on mobile, that is not an option anymore. You absolutely need to do as much as you can to optimize the experience, right? I've got some stats later. I'm going to try to produce one of them off my head. Off the top of my head, Amazon says that for each second of delay they experience on their website, their conversion rate, meaning their rate of selling stuff, drops by 3.5%, right? So,
but is it from the first second or?
I don't know. It's a good question. I think it's from the first second. So if they have two sites, one loads in 7 and one loads in 6, the one that loads in 6 is minus 3.5%. But I can find that link because I know where it is. No, absolutely. It's a good question. Google has similar statistics about the impact of this. And you're thinking, well, we're an NGO, we're not selling stuff, but you may be trying to get people to donate or get people to sign petitions, get people to volunteer, other actions on your site. If they're trying to do that and your site is really slow on your mobile device, that presents a significant problem and a significant barrier. So visual hierarchies are essential. I don't want to dig deep into this because I am not a designer, but generally the idea is on a mobile device, people are often much more easily confused. Where am I on the site? Where have I been? Where am I going? How can I get to other parts of the site, right? All these things are harder to design for on a small screen. So those things are really important to get right. To give both this and the next point, to embrace common design patterns, give people the kind of familiar visual cues so they understand where they are, where they've been, and where they're going, right? And, you know, common design patterns are things like, on a mobile device, I'm sure you've seen this, 3 little lines means there's a menu under there, right? So don't let your designer make up some new icon for a menu. They should use the 3 little lines, right? Or an ellipses means there's more down here, right? So use those visual design patterns, so have them reinforced. By the way, I'll make my slides available and send them to Eli after the talk. So if you're taking notes, I see some of you taking a lot of notes. You can lighten up on those notes or take as many notes as you want. Finally, people like to say content is king. You had a thing called content is king. On mobile, content is emperor, right? It's really important to optimize for, to have great images, to optimize the text. I have a few notes going forward about some of this stuff, right? But yeah, I wanted to go back briefly and just touch on performance more specifically. 3 common areas or 3 common issues about performance that you might want to talk to your developers and designers about. One is optimizing images. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The second is optimizing scripts. Just know that that's a thing you want to talk to your designer about. We don't need to dig into it unless you want to. And 3, it's about the number of, we're getting a little technical here, but the number of HTTP queries. The number of stuff that needs to be loaded on a page really can slow down a page. One great example of this is if you're using like a third-party service for your sharing buttons, right, like add this or share this, one of these third-party services with little buttons on that, that needs to be loaded separately from a different location than the rest of your content. So, mobile first. This is when building or rebuilding a site or building a microsite or doing development work, we kind of encourage people to take a view of mobile first and building out from there. And so these are a few ideas, important ideas to understand around this concept. The first and most difficult one to understand, I think, is responsive and adaptive. I'm hesitant. Are you connected to the internet on this computer?
Yes.
Okay. I'm hesitant to do this, but I'm gonna. I want to explain responsive by visiting the, come back to me, visiting a website. Let's try, evidently I need to put this over here.
We need to just click the checkbox and say yes.
Try D604.
What do I need to do, sir?
To the bottom one.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, you need to actually connect again here. Terrific. That was reasonably painless. Okay, now I'm going to get the WWF's website up. Whoa, that's interesting.
Extra W.
That would be why. Thank you. I don't want to click on their ads. I think that's the website I'm looking for. Okay, so this is the WWF's website, and it is a responsive website. In order to illustrate that, I need to reach a corner. Come on. Give me a second. Sorry. It's not letting me resize the page. That is a tragedy. What I wanted to show you is how this page responds when, there you go, thank you. That responded poorly, didn't it? I did this demo the other day and it worked awesomely. What I want to show you is that you can typically test this with responsive websites, that once the page is loaded, you resize it and the page resizes. But evidently that's not going to happen here, so I think we better move on. I've got examples of it here. This is what I wanted to show you, is that when the page is big like this, you have like a multi-column setup, 4-column setup, big picture, set of 4 columns underneath. When you shrink it down, when you see it on your phone, you get just the 2-column layout, right, like that, okay? So a responsive website, what essentially it does is it loads all the assets on the page and then asks your device, your computer, your tablet, your smartphone, asks your device, what size is this screen? And then it only displays or reorganizes the assets on the page to just show for that screen size, okay? It responds to the screen size, okay? This is one example. Another example is the Khan Academy. This is a popular free learning site, right? I like how different their version looks than the big version. But if you try this with the Khan Academy, you'll see the change happen as you shrink or expand the site, okay? This is kind of the current de facto approach to a website. If you were going to build a new website today, or you were going to redesign your website, talking to your designers, they'd say, yeah, you need a responsive site, right? The great thing about a responsive site is it can work on any screen size, right? I gave the spiel earlier about screen sizes being radically different. A responsive site can work really effectively at different sizes. Another real advantage of this approach is that there's just one template, if you like, right? One central framework that you build the site on, okay? And also, there's already a bunch of toolkits, developer toolkits out there that you can use to build a responsive site. So it's kind of though it is still quite new, it's an understood technology that most designers are wrestling with right now. The downside is back to the question of performance, okay? What happens is you actually have to load the whole page. Even if you're not going to show the whole page, this is a very lightweight page, no doubt intentionally, but this page has a bunch of images on it. It's got an image carousel. It's got other subsequent images. Other sites may have a video on the home page. But for a responsive site, you actually need to load all the assets on the page, right? And then hide the ones you don't want people to see because they're on a smartphone. And that can be a real performance hit. It can be serious trouble in the long run, right? My other stat is that Google says that a half-second of delay in loading a page can result in a 20% traffic drop, right? So again, we're getting more and more sensitive to performance. So the kind of next generation, which I'm only coming to grips with and understanding right now, is called an adaptive site, okay? And of course, I should also say with a responsive site, another fact is you can't like jury-rig your current site to become a responsive site. You kind of have to go start building a site from scratch, or even if you want to mimic the look and feel of your current site, you need to build it from the ground up. With an adaptive site, right, the great thing about an adaptive site is I think of it as a much more kind of subtle approach to this problem, where you can actually say, okay, for devices that have a retina display, which means a high quality, high resolution display, not like this phone, but like a new iPad, for example, I'm going to offer up retina quality images. But for a regular phone like this, I'm only going to offer regular images, right? So it can be much more adaptive, much more responsive to even individual devices like a tablet or a laptop or an iPhone specifically. You know, one of Mobify's clients is a single day deal site like Groupon, except it's for fashion. And so if you know anything about women's device buying habits, they buy astronomically by iPhones. And so 95% of the mobile traffic or smartphone traffic to this single day deal site is for the iPhone, right? So it makes sense then for this site to optimize with an adaptive response, particularly for the iPhone. Not just for any smartphone, but particularly for the iPhone, for that particular aspect ratio and size and quality of the iPhone and the features it has. So yeah, adaptive, it's more complicated. It's like we actually have relatively few examples of adaptive sites being executed, but it certainly is the future. The nice thing is you can build individual templates and like bake in adaptive to your site. So if you had that, we've got a regular site. We just want to make a mobile site strictly for iPad traffic. You could use some adaptive technologies to do that. Responsive uses very common commonly understood stuff like HTML and CSS. You may or may not know what those acronyms are, but every one of your designers do. Adaptive goes into the land of JavaScript, which is a higher kind of level ask, and not ridiculously technical, but you often go from designer to developer there, right? So you need a web developer for your site. So that's just understanding adaptive and responsive, because they're a language that I expect you'll hear a lot about in the last few years. I want to talk a bit about image optimization. I want to talk about that at two levels. One level is the more technical, boring level, which is you do need to think about images are a huge part of your performance, right? So you do need to talk to your designer about how you can optimize images so the site loads faster. I saw an example from a major clothing retailer. I can't tell you who they are, but they're a household name. And they had a responsive site, super, super sexy. The whole site took 9 megs to load. That was 9 megs of images on the homepage, which is a ton. It's just, trust me when I say, that was not performing well. And that after we optimized the images, or my friend optimized the images on it, it shrunk it down to under 1 meg, right? So all they did was just like make the images more efficient, and the use of images more efficient, and they radically reduced the size. But the more interesting thing I think about mobile and images is making them readable, and this kind of applies to social media specifically, but also more generally. I've got a bit about email newsletters. This is a fantastic image. We did some research last year where we analyzed 1,000 Facebook posts from environmental NGO Facebook pages, right, to evaluate which ones got shared the most, right, meaning, or which ones got engaged with the most, meaning got liked, shared, and commented on. If you want to read that article, just Google my name, Darren Barefoot, and Mobilization Lab. It's posted on Greenpeace's Mobilization Lab. If you're working in Facebook, like, I'm not singing our own praises, but the data in that analysis just proved super useful to us. And this is was this first or second? I think this is the first. This is the most winning image, the most engaged with image of the 1,000 posts we looked at, right? And it's a great image, right? This is like sushi wrapped in garbage. It's from Surfrider Foundation. If you're looking for a model to emulate of somebody who's killing it on the web, the Surfrider Foundation, who engages surfers on ocean conservation issues, do a fantastic job. It's super clear, super obvious, great message. If you got that on your phone or your tablet, it would be easy to read and easy to understand the context for it, right? And if you went by it in Facebook or even on their website or wherever, super easy. This is a less effective image. This is a screenshot I took off my phone. Also in Facebook, but on my phone. And this is about from an organization that is fighting to get rid of nuclear weapons. But impossible to read on your phone, right? You'd have to zoom, 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 and nobody's going to do that. It's also a complicated, it's a kind of infographic, I guess, a complicated infographic with lots of little bits of text. And so when thinking about images, particularly about shareable images, think about clarity. Think about the mobile-first experience of people looking at that on their phone. This extends also to article length and headline length and tweet length and all these sorts of things. This is a chart from HubSpot, which shows which tweets they analyzed, a zillion tweets, to see which tweets got the most clicks. And interestingly, tweets with lots of words in them, up to a certain point, get the most clicks, right? On the other hand, I think with headlines and with article length, you want to be quite conservative. I'm sure some of you had the experience of going to, I think of Jezebel or Gawker or some of those properties where they write really long headlines, and you go on your phone and the headline fills up the whole screen, right? That is not a good user experience, right? So when you're writing blog posts, developing page titles, this sort of thing, shorter is better, right? Less text, simpler is better on the web. Calls to action. Lots of you who are running NGOs have calls to action. Please sign our petition. Please donate. Please volunteer. Please come to our events, right? All calls to action. You can't really see it here. I wish this was a wall display in which I could go swipe and zoom in, but I can't. But recognize that the mobile experience for calls to action is different from the desktop experience. I just looked at a client's conversion rate for signing a petition for the past 3 or 4 months. And you can't see it here, but for people who are not on mobile, for people who are on their computer, the conversion rate is a very solid 23%, right? People who are on their mobile device, And this is actually a pretty responsive, pretty good petition. 15% or 14.7%. So that's still pretty respectable, but understand that as your traffic moves to mobile, because right now, I'm going to guess that 10 to 40% of your traffic is mobile, depending on what kind of charity you are, who your audience is, how often you send email, because people read email more often on their smartphone than they do on their computer now. That mobile traffic's getting bigger. There's no denying it. Just understand this experience. I have two examples. This is a petition on a site that we actually work on, so I can make fun of our own work. But this is if you visit this petition page, which performs exceptionally well, I should add, on the desktop, but we just haven't gotten to the mobile version of it yet. This is a great petition page, by the way. We've tested it aggressively. There's no links anywhere on the page, right? If you see this on the desktop, just some text, some pictures, very short petition, submit down at the bottom, right? Great petition. But the mobile device, right? Those little fields there are like this big on my phone. They're like 4 pixels high, right? So nobody is going to sign this petition, and we get a lousy response rate for mobile signups. Conversely, lots of organizations do mobile petitions well. This is change.org, which is a kind of tool you can use to create petitions. And they have a great, I'm not going to run you through the whole process here, but when you hit this any of their petitions, you get this user experience. Again, really, really simple. There's basically 2 things you can click. The login button, but it's grayed out, and up in the top corner, they do not want you to click that. They want you to click this thing down here, the sign up button, which is big and extends across the entire viewport and is red, right? And so click that, you're going to get a very simple, really easy to enter petition sign up form. My last section, I want to talk for a couple minutes about mobile email, just a few kind of best practices there, a few things to think about. This kind of extends the mobile first idea from the previous talk. 2 important ideas. One is the power of the pre-header, it's called, or the preview window, right? For those of you who have iPhones, they're set by default to offer 2 lines of text, right? 2 lines of text view into the email plus the subject line. Similarly here, that pre-header is incredibly important. It's incredibly important what you put in that preview frame, right? Here you can see a full-size email and how Zappos puts the pre-header up there, right? And this is a good one. Get free shipping on summer essentials. Thanks, or XOXO, hugs and kisses, Zappos.com, right? So that's what you see. It's hard to make out, but that's what you see down here. So you want great compelling text in that pre-header, and you always want to include your call to action in that header too. Whatever the call to action is in the email, right? Regardless of whether that's like, read our blog post about the kittens we saved, or whether it's donate now, have that call to action. The effectiveness of that, and you should also be testing that pre-header, certainly, because the effectiveness of that pre-header is super, super amplified on mobile, right? Rule of thumb on that, 85 characters. That's how long you have there, 85 characters for the pre-header. And likewise, the subject line, I'm not going to talk to you about subject lines, but subject lines probably need to be shorter than you think, 35 characters or shorter to be like mobile optimized. Other general ideas. This is, you can also use this kind of responsive approach in email. So this is a desktop email, sample desktop email. On the right is what you would get when you saw this email in mobile, right? It's not great. The text is really small. The header is really big. We're literally using, a big chunk for that. Yet here's a responsive edition version of that widget. I think this is probably too much header, but still, this text is going to be really easy to read, right? But things like single column layout, right? I still get a bunch of email newsletters where there's more than one column in the newsletter, right? That does not work well on mobile at all because it squishes everything. Separate links, keep links far apart because it's really hard to tap. It's especially hard to tap little tiny links. And make big buttons, right? We are a huge fan of the big dumb button. Big dumb button on the website, big dumb button in email too. It's a good approach. I just like these 2 graphics because they highlighted something that is sort of true for all of us, I think, true for all of our experience, but super useful in thinking about building websites and designing mobile experiences. This is where we tap most of the time, right on our phone, right? Left thumb or right thumb, kind of in the middle of this phone space. And on the tablet, we actually kind of hit these higher areas on the sides, these kind of hot zones, right? Because that's where our thumbs are when we're surfing.
Yeah, but don't you have the tablet both ways? Like, don't you use it this way? And then
You know, I don't have any statistics on this. I would go Google it right now, but I invite somebody to Google it. But my guess is that 80 to 90% of the tablet experience is portrait version. Now, I don't know. Does anybody in the room have, I don't know. That's just a guess. I could be totally wrong about that. But when I myself use my tablet, and this is bad, you shouldn't say that ever anecdotally, but when I watch my peers and people in rooms, they have it mostly portrait. And so, I don't know. I'm going to find out after this because I don't want to be that wrong necessarily. But
I think for reading it would be vertical because you get more text, and for media it would be more.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I like reading it this way. I like having
You may
it's
be,
like a book,
yeah.
right?
You may be an outlier. You may be the future, though. Who knows? Maybe
I'll take
yeah,
that.
Because we may experience more media and less text on the web too. But both orientations matter. Look at your, similarly with a phone, we were at a microsite development project that was it was a responsive site that was really struggling. It was really big, had performance issues on the phone, and he's like, "It works great this way." I'm like, "But everyone's going to look at it this way, not this way, right?" So, and you can't really tell people turn your phone. Yeah, and I want to kind of wrap up there. I just thought this was really cool. I just saw this yesterday, so I wanted to stick it on there. It was earlier in the month, evidently. One of the we've been working on the web since 2002, and, well, even earlier, but one of the things we always say is that when there's a new technology, a new channel, right? I use channel just to mean communications channel. If you can be one of the first people in that channel, you get this amazing first mover advantage because you are teaching people how to use that channel, and then they adopt you, right? And we've seen this from like blogs to Second Life. Does anybody in the room know what I mean when I say Second Life? Okay, some of you are good. And then up to Vine. This is what Red is. They're a charity trying to beat AIDS, particularly in the developing world. They do lots of clever stuff online, and they had, I guess, kind of essentially tweet up or an online challenge to get people to create Vine videos, and they got a bunch of media partners. I couldn't fit them in down here, but there's some media partners down here. And they said they just claimed this. They set a world record for most Vine videos ever created for a cause in one day. For lots of their supporters, this may have been the first time those people heard about Vine, right? Oh, what's this Vine? Oh, I'll download. Vine is a 6 seconds, by the way, is a 6-second video app that Twitter launched, I don't know, at the beginning of the year maybe. And so it is very early days for this app still, but this is just like a great mobile campaign that an NGO did, so I thought, oh, hey, I'm talking about those things, so I'll include it. But super clever, and I'm sure if you Google... don't worry, I'm wrapping up before 9. If you Google Red and Vine campaign, you'll find it. So what can you do today if you want to start now? Well, one thing you can do is you can look at your website in your email program, your newsletters or whatever kind of email programs you do. Look what it looks like on a smartphone and tablet. Just judge for yourself as a starting point. Does it suffer from a lot of the symptoms I've talked about today, or does it look awesome, right? Then have a conversation with your developer, designer, your team, whoever that is about that. And also, start looking at your Google Analytics in the context of, because they can tell you what percentage of your, as I showed you, what percentage of your visitors come from mobile devices, and specifically, what devices do those visitors come from, right? Different organizations are going to have radically different profiles. I mentioned open media at the start of the day. Open media would have a hardcore nerd following, again, very nerd positive, and so lots of Android. There'd be lots of Android visitors in their analytics, I would guess. But somebody like Beauty Nights would have lots and a much higher degree of iOS or Apple device visitors, right? So yeah, I guess what I hope I've done here is filled your brain with a bunch of ideas and thoughts and notions about what mobile is today and where we're kind of headed. And now I would invite questions, or we can all go home. And you may applaud now. Sometimes it helps to be told. Does anybody have a question? Yes?
Can you go back to the subject line? You were talking about length and that
Mhm.
sort of thing. Do you have anything to expand on
Subject lines. It's been fascinating to watch subject lines. I would encourage everybody in the room to sign up to Lead Now. Some of you in the room may know Lead Now. They're kind of a youth engagement, progressive youth engagement organization. Their newsletter subject lines, and also Some of Us, okay? S-U-M of us. And just sign up just so you can learn from their newsletters. They're both really experimental in their newsletters. And one thing that's totally fascinating in both their newsletters is they are now using like just single nouns or like proper nouns in their newsletters. Like Some of Us, which is a consumer action organization, they had an anti-Air Canada. I don't know. They were upset with Air Canada for some reason. I didn't read that one. But their the subject line was literally Air Canada, right? And how do they know that's a good subject line? It's because they tested it, right? Do you know about A/B testing? Okay, cool. So A/B testing is a process where you say, I have a hypothesis that a short subject line is going to be better than a long subject line, right? And I have a hypothesis that just Air Canada is going to be better than Air Canada screwed this passenger and I hate them, or whatever, right? And then what common email newsletter tools, right, like any of them really these days, but like MailChimp or Campaign Monitor or tools that lots of people use to send out, they enable you to do something called A/B testing. What you say is, okay, we have a list of 1,000 people. We're going to send this subject line to 250 and this subject line to another 250 and see which one gets opened more, right?
Oh, direct marketing.
Yeah, it's essentially a direct marketing strategy. And then which of those works best, right? You know, in 4 hours, you'll find out which is the winner. And then the other 500 get the winner, right? And you've also learned something generally about your audience and about how to send emails, right? So my first thing about email subject lines would be test. Test them, see what works with your organization. Because any rules of thumb are only those, and they can be broken, right? But yeah, short. Another thing I'm really seeing a lot of is, this is not subject line, but person's name in the from field, right? So instead of sending it from, here I am seeking okay, so CPAWS BC's, so instead of from CPAWS BC, Canadian Parks and Wilderness BC chapter, it says from Nikki Hill, comma, CPAWS BC. Nikki is the executive director, right? And so that personalization of the from field works better than just from an organization, unquestionably, right? As a general rule. Again, you can test that too. Subject lines, you don't want to deceive people. You want to be specific. You do want to create something called the curiosity gap, right? Where in those 35 characters, you raise something, you raise a question, you raise a curiosity. Another subject line I might test is, why did Air Canada not let this guy on the plane? That's probably too long, but you could tweak that. The people who are killers at headlines and subject lines are Upworthy. Okay? Upworthy is an organization that basically, they're kind of a BuzzFeed for inspiring stuff. And they're somebody from The Onion and a founder from 350.org or some other organization came together. So I would just check out Upworthy. One thing they do, they took from The Onion, and this is something I'd also recommend, they write 25 headlines or 25 subject lines for each piece of content, and then pick the best one. I know you're like, what, 25? It is a pain. And people who work for me, I'm like, go write 24 more, right? And they're like, yeah, no. Well, then I tell them to, but it makes you be super clinical and super creative, right? No doubt, it broadens your mind and says, oh, what other approaches could I take to this story, right? And then you pick a couple and test those. That was a long answer. But,
Yeah, that's a good answer. Thank you.
sir.
You mentioned about each additional half second or second reducing revenue chances and so. And you also mentioned that scripts are slowing our site.
Mm-hmm.
eBay supplies buttons, buy here or buy button
Mm-hmm.
for Web 2, very simple to use and only for code writing.
Mm-hmm.
How bad is it for? It's a script. It's an
Yeah, like I don't understand. My comprehension of this is reasonably shallow, but lots of websites can have a ton of scripts, right, on the page, working in the background, and those can take up a lot of load time, right? And so there are tools and techniques that the developers use to optimize to, one thing they do is to concatenate those scripts, is the technical term, I think, and then also to optimize them, to shrink them. So I can't speak specifically to the eBay thing. If that's like the only external JavaScript on your site, you're probably okay, right? But if you got that plus a sharing tool plus some other, your Twitter, recent updates from Twitter and all those things are contributing, then that may be slowing down your site. There are lots of tools online where you can just go and test the speed of your site and compare it to other sites, right, of a similar type, right, like all NGO sites or all e-commerce sites, something like that. So I think that's a good thing to do. You can also look in your Google Analytics for page load times, and then you can go do some research about what the industry standard load times are for a particular, like for the NGO sector or something like that. So I'd say that'd be a good place to start at least. Yeah. Another question? Sorry.
Yeah, you were talking about responsive design earlier, and like, is that still kind of like difficult and expensive to do? What are the best ways of going about making a new responsive site that aren't too?
Yeah, I
crazy
mean,
difficult?
I don't know if they're that. I think it's fair to expect any designer today to be able to build a responsive site. So I would just go get some bids and see what they say, and don't let them like try to upsell you that it's magically responsive. Like, I think responsive comes standard now, right? We just worked with somebody to build a little website, like a reasonably small, but quite sexy looking website with some technical term parallax effects or some cool scrolly effects. It was like under $10,000, right? So I know that's a lot of money or a little money depending on what kind of organization you work with, but it was still and it's a responsive site. So I think that's anyway, I don't think, and there's all these frameworks now available for a designer to go and grab and start to work with, and tons of examples online now. So I guess my first answer is it shouldn't be like a premium to build a site like that anymore, and maybe you need to shop around a little bit to find somebody to do that. Other than that, I would just take the same approach I took for any other website. I think a responsive site, I mean, I would, if you have a designer in-house or there's somebody specifically you want to work with and they say, well, we can't do that, it's going to be way too expensive, ask them to talk you through why it's going to be expensive, right? And ask them to talk you through the justification for right now, 20 or 15% or 30% of our traffic is mobile. All the lines are going up. Why wouldn't we want a responsive site, right? So I know I'm kind of going around your question a little bit, but I do honestly think it's that stuff comes standard now. And if you need to lean on somebody a little bit by getting other bids or going another way, you should do that, I think, because the conversations I've had with designers in the last 6 months are all yeah, we get that. We wouldn't be serving the client correctly if we weren't building a site that worked on mobile too. So that's a bit lame, I know, but that's what it is. Yeah. One more question. Yeah.
Explain adaptive a bit more. Are you building
No.
several iterations?
I can't really because I don't know. I understand a lot more about it than what I said. I mean, yeah, I can tell you that it's a bunch of different templates, right, for different device profiles, meaning individual devices, right, like the iPad 3 or the iPhone 5, for example, right? And so it's a whole series of, that's just a piece of it, though. I'm going to defer this question by encouraging you to go read Brad Frost's work. So Google Brad Frost, an adaptive. He's basically the guy who invented a lot of this. And he has a great slideshow that explains a lot of this. He has this Venn diagram where responsive is actually part of adaptive, so responsive falls inside adaptive. I think you're going to need to understand responsive a lot more quickly than you are adaptive. So, again, this is my shortcoming up here certainly, but I think Brad Frost done some great explanation on this, and yeah, I think it'll go a long way. And I don't want to pimp my client here, but afterwards, if you want to come up, I'll tell you something else to Google, and you'll find some resources they've got that will explain this too. Yeah.
Sweet. There we go, ladies and gentlemen, Darren Barefoot.